All right. I am on air. We are on air. And it's been a while since I've had a live stream, of course, because I'm Prince of Queens guy who was banned from live streaming for so incredibly long. Then I had this side channel, which is no longer being used. There's going to be a new channel for this, Gaytriarchy 2.0. And I'm doing this one here to, I guess, I don't know, advertise the new channels everyone knows, and also so I can collect super chats because I'm so excited to have to be perfectly honest, I'm just going to be honest here. I have been a fan of Karen Straughan since, I believe, very early 2016 or maybe late 2015. And when I would have looked at YouTube back then, there would have been a list of about 5 people that I wanted to, get to know on a live stream. Like I would watch these live streams and be like, I want to talk to these people. And she would have been in the top 3, really. And I'm not going to say whether or not I've met some of the other ones because
top 3, not number 1.
Well, it's hard to say. Well, when I first really got into
okay, continue. I just needed to.
when I first really got into YouTube, I have to admit, I really wanted to meet Dave Rubin. Like I was one of the people that was like, "Ooh, it'd be so cool to chat with him." Oh, it costs $1,000, So I really was into Dave Rubin, and I like Straughan a lot. But I would say that you more than anybody has helped refine my arguing about feminists and feminism, and I even included. Okay, I have a video playlist called Introduction to My Views on Feminism, and it actually includes your video, Why Do MRAs Attack Feminism? And I did that because of the fact that you said it so perfectly in that video. I've shared that video, Why Do MRAs Attack Feminism, so many times because that little stupid thing all you ever do is attack feminism, you don't do anything. It just comes up so often. So yeah, it's really cool to actually have you on a live stream. I met you about a year ago, and yeah, so welcome, Karen Straughan, to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and we're going to force you to talk about gay guys, obviously, with my 2 friends. So people probably know Derek Spacepan in the subtle ANCAPy thumbnail. And
Ben, it's a pile of clowns and stuff.
So he's been my long time.
I actually thought it was a sewing machine. What the fuck?
No, I can't sew. I can put a pile of crap together and then I put a cool filter on to make it look all ANCAPy.
Okay, all right. I'll give you that. But I still think it looks like a sewing machine.
I could see that.
So yeah, he's great. He's been my longtime co-host. And then also Lordy over here has been on Gaytriarchy a number of times, so some people might remember him, but he is now an official co-host, and we have all sorts of interesting stuff to talk about. But to be perfectly honest, I'm gonna let somebody else start talking for the moment because I just talked a lot.
Okay, but you have to assign somebody else to start talking. Otherwise, we're all just going to start interrupting each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where do we begin? Okay. So Derek, actually, I got him to write out a number of discussion topics that we should be talking about that he was interested in. And one of the things that we were just talking about off air, and he actually brought up in the discussion format, or in behind the scenes discussing with me what we would be talking about, is this concept of intersectionality as it applies to the men's rights movement. Now, I'm very torn personally on whether or not people should use intersectionality at all ever, because I'm sort of more inclined to think that individualism is more potent than trying to use a game of simple arithmetic to calculate anything. But still, it should be of note that if you want to even pretend to be intersectional, you should admit that men are having it worse than women, and that You know, like every time the intersectionality model is used, it always gives them an extra oppression point for being female, which is dumb. So I don't know. Derek, what do you got to say about that?
Sure. Well, it kind of goes back to, you hear it really often within the MRM where we point out, like, MRAs get called misogynist, and then we say, what about female MRAs, right? And we get called racist, say, what about black MRAs? What about gay MRAs? And one thing that was really interesting to point out was that there's a lot of issues that are particular to these subgroups where you add multiple group identities over them. Now, of course, I agree that individualism is obviously kind of I view it as the most high resolution way to look at these problems. And then as you pan out, intersectionality is kind of in this gray space where it's sort of moderately at a resolution. And then the kind of standard narratives of here are Black issues, here are women's issues, right? Where it's one sort of larger umbrella, that's like the lowest resolution. And like, it gets a bad rep. I don't think it's necessarily that intersectionality itself has a problem. It's just that it's misapplied. It's applied so horribly. I remember when I was in college, we read this book, Contract and Domination, and they made it was literally a 2x2 grid of oppression, right? And they put it like a diamond, kind of like the 2D political compass, where they put white men at the top as the least oppressed, right? And then on the two sides of it, you have Black people on one side and then women on the other. And then down at the bottom, most oppressed was Black women, right? They felt the need to diagram that out. And that image just really sticks with me because it's so funny and simplistic. But the point is that within anti-feminism, even though generally people hate this idea of intersectionality because it's been given such a bad name, we actually use it all the time. And it's actually kind of super useful. And it reminds me of, Karen, I think it was, I'm not sure exactly when it was that this had occurred, but you had mentioned it a few years back where you were speaking with a group of feminists and they were talking about Black issues. And then you mentioned, aren't these Black male issues? And there was a Black man in the audience who kind of, maybe got a little red pilled over that, kind of realized you know what, I can't picture a Black woman dealing with all these things we just listed. This is a Black male issue. I don't know if you recall exactly.
Yeah, I do. I do recall. It was actually on an episode of The Agenda with Steve Paikin on TV Ontario's broadcaster, right? So essentially, I was on there to talk about white privilege. And it's not really something that's in my wheelhouse, other than the fact that white privilege is a concept that was whose wellspring came from the concept of male privilege that is a feminist essentially juggernaut. It's one of their fundamentals, right? Male privilege, right? And all other areas where people talk about privilege is essentially an offshoot of that, right? But I did tell he was a magazine writer, Desmond Cole, right? That, it's not driving while Black, it's driving while Black and male. And he actually came back and said, well, I agree with you. My daughter, my sister or my mother would probably never be pulled over for driving while Black, but I still don't think that I've ever been discriminated against for being male. And I still think that my sister and my mother have it worse as Black women than I do as a Black man. And I'm just like, oh my freaking God. How can you object to stop and frisk policies? How can you object to being followed in a department store, right? Because you're a Black male, right? All of these things by security, all of these things that you are talking about, and not acknowledge the male aspect of that, and not acknowledge that axis of the discrimination that you're suffering. It's not just because you're Black. A white person dressed like Jesse Pinker from Breaking Bad is going to get followed in a department store, right? He's going to get pulled over if he's driving a really nice car, right? Because he does not look like the kind of person who could afford that car, right? All of those things, right? How can you essentially sit there and tell me that it's not only is this only because you're Black, and none of it is because you're male, but also that Black women have it worse than you do on every single metric? And this is really you know, the like you said, right? Intersectionality is a useful concept. It absolutely is, right? Gay men have had their daughters taken away from them, right, by child services over concerns about pedophilia. These are gay men, right? These are men who are not attracted to women, who do not want to fuck women or girls, and yet there is a concern there because not only are they male and more likely to be pedophilic, but they're also gay. So their sexuality is degenerate, and therefore, you know, we have to be super careful about them. Like,
do you think
intersectionality is a useful concept, but it is not the only concept, and it cannot fucking play out in every single situation in exactly the same way. You cannot say that women will have it worse in every single circumstance. But this is really what intersectional advocates tend to go to, right? Is when you say to them, okay, so women who make an accusation, an unsubstantiated false accusation of sexual or physical abuse during a custody battle, right? They often end up with custody of the kids, and by the time the issue is revisited, because they get an ex parte restraining order, right? Which means that the restraining order is issued within 3 to 8 minutes. When the woman goes and applies for it, the man is not even notified that there is an issue here, right? Until he's arrested for returning to his home or whatever. And then it's revisited in anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months, where he's allowed to give his evidence and disprove it. And then what ends up happening is the judge typically says, well, the children are now comfortable in their new situation, and they also now are they've been alienated from their father, and they have feelings of anxiety and fear around him. And so let's just give him supervised visitation or no visitation at all.
So
right?
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And so essentially, even if the man can prove himself innocent, even if the man can prove that he never laid a finger on his wife or his children, right, he still loses custody, because the judge is essentially going to say, well, the children have this idea now in their heads that their dad's an abuser, and so it would be traumatizing for them to be handed over into his custody. Right. So so the woman.
Right. And all of this is justified through.
The woman gets what she wants. Okay. But here's the thing. In terms of intersectionality, feminists would say that's prejudice against women.
Yeah. How? Well, I don't know how, but
it's prejudice against women because it relies on the idea that women are the proper and appropriate caregivers for children. Right. Because they're the ones who pop out babies and raise them, and that's what they're good for, right? And that women are considered to be, I guess, children in the sense of their responsibility for their actions. And this really is a misogynistic attitude. It is based in misogyny, and therefore, this action where a woman asked for something, misbehaved, right, abused process, and demanded something and got everything she wanted and was not punished for her abusive process, is actually male privilege backfiring.
Yeah, it's hard to even follow that train of logic, and I'm impressed that you've done it in so many instances of, because I've heard you do that, and that's something that's very impressive about you. Now, 2 questions that I have. First of all, I want to ask you, you mentioned gay guys in there. When you talk about how gay guys get their children taken away from them, I wonder if, would you say that is having to do with something similar to the Duluth model of power and control?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so
it's androphobia.
Okay, so yeah, it frames gay men as the Basically,
It essentially
in the same,
says gay men are just like all men, which means bad and abusive and, you know, potential perpetrators,
wanting to
but
dominate
also,
women.
yeah, but also degenerate in the
Okay.
sense that their sexuality is different. So yeah, maybe they aren't going to abuse women, maybe they aren't going to sexually violate women, but you know, you never know what they're going to get up to.
But that's that's what I wanted to bring up. The literal thing that actually inspired me to take action, make my channel, and start becoming I was a closeted MRA for the first few months, and then I fully declared myself an MRA. Now I'm kind of a part-time MRA because I make so many videos. And
whatever. But you know, it's nice that you came out of the closet. That's great.
Yeah, but the thing that I was really inspired, the thing that it went over the edge, and this I feel has resonated with a lot of gay men, is the accusation. And this started in 2014 was when this got in media. I've made video after video mentioning this. I made a whole video about it, like the origin story of this accusation, which is completely fictitious, is that actually gay men constantly grope women and sexually assault them. And that supposedly every time a woman goes into a gay bar, she gets pawed all over, and sometimes they reach down and grab her vagina, according to this one author. And this accusation has become completely commonplace in both feminist blogs and LGBT blogs.
Really?
And
I have never, like, maybe I'm just not part of the gay.
I can show you these. I just haven't been paying attention, but
I have been to gay bars on men's night. Back in the late 80s, late 1980s. So this is a while back when things were still a little bit crazy. When you could actually get away with touching a stripper, whether male or female, right? At least where I'm from. Now we have laws in place, at least, and that protect women. The laws were put in place to protect female strippers. They are generally not enforced when it comes to male strippers, but I never, like, I was one of 3 women in a bar full of like 250 men, and I didn't get groped a single time. In fact, I kind of felt a little left out.
They probably didn't even look at you.
You know, they didn't, right? The only ones who looked at me were my friends who had invited me along, right? And everybody else just ignored me. The center of attraction was the guy with, you know, the little, I guess the erectile aid strapped around the base of his penis, you know, who was dancing around. And, you know, I had been to, at that point, several ladies' nights with male strippers. And I can tell you that the gay men were much more reserved when it came to putting their hands on the merchandise than the women were.
But see, that's one of the conflicts anyway, though, is that, like, okay, so sometimes gay bars will have go-go dancers and you do touch them. I have literally walked up to, there was a go-go dancer and he was like so incredibly hot. And this is in a really, really gritty, you know, kind of leather bar in San Francisco where things are really, really crazy. And I tell this story a lot because I'm very proud of this. I can show you pictures of this guy. He won Mr. International Leather that year. And he was dancing with a jockstrap on and a blindfold. And everybody was just staring at him with their jaws dropped because he was so hot, but he wasn't getting any tips. And they want tips. They want dollars put in their jockstrap.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I was fairly good looking at the time, and I was with 2 friends, and I was like, hey, should I try to eat that guy's ass for $1? Do you think he would? And they were like, yeah, do it, try it. And so I walked up to him and I said, hey, could I eat your ass for $1? And he just bent over. Like, he did not say a single goddamn thing. And I literally stuck my tongue in his ass, and it was minty fresh, as if he had put some sort of like thing, like, like I don't know,
Paul Mitchell's tea tree oil,
yeah,
hair and body moisturizer on it
in his asshole. And so, okay, things do get like that in a lot of gay bars. Yeah, there's a lot of massive friskiness, but at the same time, I have literally gotten laid because a guy grabbed my ass or stroked my dick, and so that's a part of gay culture. I think that feminists, they just hate that they can't control us, so they make up these stories about things, and it's like sort of believable that maybe gay guys would also grab women because everybody knows that gay guys, and so that's where it gets really, really strange. And that's what inspired me to create my channel, was this notion that feminists were not happy letting gay men be gay men. It's kind of like the whole Gamergate thing. They wanted to take over the gaming community, and then they came for the gay men, and it showed how absurd it was.
Are you familiar?
Can I say a sad story about being in a gay club?
Yes. Okay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the sad thing that's happened, because it's true, like stroking a guy's dick or grabbing his ass can often lead to an amazing night of sex. The sad thing that's happened to me recently is that I had the experience where after a night of stroking and grabbing, I got completely just rejected. And I was like, that is the sad thing. It's like, instead of it ending in a night of beautiful sex, it ended in rejection. And I was like, what, you just played this shitty game with me all night? I felt like a straight dude in that moment.
That is actually what straight guys go through a lot. Like they literally, like when you look at lifetime sexual partners, what you find, like for the people who essentially have the highest number of lifetime sexual partners, you find gay guys right at the fucking top, right? In the thousands. Okay. You find straight guys somewhere in the middle, in the maybe around 100, 180. If you're Mick Jagger, 4,000, but not everybody is Mick Jagger, right? And then for lesbians, it's like 20, right? And why is that? Because men are sexually proceptive and women are sexually receptive. And so when you have two sexually proceptive men who meet each other at some point, they're both actually actively looking for sex, right? And so if there's any receptivity at all on the part of the other man, it's a go, right? There's no woman to convince, right? And when you look at lesbians, none of them are actively proceptive. None of them are actively seeking sex, right? At least not beyond the U-Haul phase of the relationship. And so essentially what you have is you have two women to convince, right? The men don't need a whole lot of convincing. Men don't need a whole lot of convincing. Even men who are, I will say, it is absolutely, I will say, there are men who are forced into sexual acts with heterosexual men, with women that they regret, they didn't want it, they didn't consent to it, and they have some extremely negative fallout from that. Absolutely 100%. But when you actually have one sex that is actively on the trail, right, on the scent, right, and the other sex that is essentially just waiting to be noticed, when you have gay men, you're going to have a lot more sexual partners. When you have lesbian women, you're going to have a lot fewer. And heterosexual people are going to be somewhere in between, because there's a man involved, right? And he's on the scent, he's on the trail. He's actively looking for sexual opportunities. And so, I mean, like the whole thing there, absolutely. One of the things that I wanted to bring up was, have any of you read the Red Stocking Manifesto?
I've read bits and pieces of it because you recommended it to me when we talked before. But I have not read the whole thing, and I'm not sure what part you are going to want to refer to. So
the entire premise of the Red Stocking Manifesto, which is it's a product of second wave feminism, is that gay men are misogynists because they refuse to have sex with women.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've certainly heard that brought up a lot. There's a great essay called "Dangerous Trends in Feminism" that was originally read at a gay academic union conference in 1976 or 77. It's written by a guy named John Lortzen, and I've referred to it in a lot of my videos. Paul Elam published it on A Voice for Men.
Mhm.
And it's also been published in a few other places online. And I think that he talked about that attitude from feminists.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's honestly something that I think has come up kind of full circle to this day.
Yes.
They won't come right out and say it, but they have all these implied things. Like I will send, after this is over, I will send you my video about the origin story of gay men groping women, because I have like 6 or 7 or 8 examples of this coming up. I think it's like they want to say it, but they won't come right out and say it because it sounds a little obviously fucking homophobic. It's basically saying that gay men don't exist, and I assure you we do. Like if I had sex with a woman, I would feel like I was raping Tori Amos.
Why Tori Amos?
Because she's my favorite.
Okay. What I want to say is essentially that when you actually look at the issue itself, right? So during the second wave, when the Red Stocking Manifesto was written, where feminists essentially said that gay men were not gay because they love other men, but because they hate women, right? There were feminist women who were essentially prescribing something called political lesbianism. So you should, even if you're not attracted to women, you should have sex with women and not men as a political statement, statement of your objection to men and masculinity, of your hatred of men. So you literally had these two simultaneous things where they're condemning gay men because apparently gay men don't want to fuck other men. They actually just hate women and want to deprive them of sexual opportunities, right? Where at the same time they're prescribing a political program of political lesbianism where even straight women should only fuck women because men are shit.
So in always this supports communism, essentially.
Well, the whole thing is communism. I mean, like, go back to the Declaration of Sentiments. Go back to 1848, same year that the Communist Manifesto was published, right? The Declaration of Sentiments. Go through that list of bullet points and see and like literally read them in the context, through the framework, under the rubric, right, of class conflict theory, right, of Marxist theory. All you have to do is put bourgeoisie in the place of men and proletariat in the place of women, and you've got the Communist Manifesto.
Okay, wait. What is the Declaration of Sentiments?
It came out
Elizabeth Cady Stanton's.
It was an Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony project that came out of Seneca Falls, New York. It was the first conference essentially on women's rights. They essentially told all of the men who wanted to attend to sit in the back and keep quiet. And they had their conference, they gave their speeches, and they put out a manifesto called the Declaration of Sentiments. And it included a bullet point list of grievances under the essentially the preamble that the history of mankind is a history of injuries and usurpation on the part of man toward woman, having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over her.
Yeah. Okay. That makes absolute sense. Now, one of the things that I brought up in my hour-long intersectional feminism is communist particle board video that you haven't watched yet.
I watched it.
Yeah, both.
I'm sorry, I haven't watched it. I've been receiving weird random phone calls from people I don't even know.
No, not offended. But one of the things that I bring up is that, so, okay. everybody sort of thinks of feminism and Marxism as basically the same, but I posit from all of my research that there's actually a very distinct, strange thing that kind of happened, because I don't think that Marx himself was a feminist. From everything that I've gathered, and could easily be corrected about this, but my audience is pretty good and they haven't corrected, like they're pretty well read and they haven't corrected me on this, is that it's entirely possible that Marx would have been a little bit more of an MRA because of the fact that he was so obsessed with the conditions of factory workers. And
yes,
but the feminism came from his little friend that he got money from, Frederick Engels, who ended up a year after Marx died.
Well, isn't it convenient that the one with the money just takes the good ideas and makes it work towards his own agenda? Anyways,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, good point. and so yeah, a year after Marx died, that guy wrote the book The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State. And that book, even though it was written a year after Marx's death, so nobody actually knows what Marx would have thought of it, it became basically the cornerstone of the way that female communists, at least in the United States, thought about women. And it was not dissimilar to what you were just talking about. What the something of sentiments? What's it called again?
Declaration of Sentiments.
Declaration of Sentiments. It sounds pretty similar, but the thing is that feminists and Marxists were largely considered different, at least in the United States, prior to the Cold War.
Ernest Belfort Bax was a Marxist socialist, and he wrote several essays. One of them called On the Legal Subjection of Men, another one on essentially oh God, I can't even remember what it was called. Just look up E. Belfort Bax, right? And you will find him describing two types of feminists. This is in 1910, 1911, right? Two types of feminists. There were feminists who were, he described as egalitarian, right? They wanted everything, equal rights and equal responsibilities across the board. Then there were what he called sentimental feminists, right? Who wanted to maintain female privilege, what he called sex privilege, right? So the right to be entitled to the support of a husband, the right to alimony in a divorce, all kinds of legal privileges and protections. They're essentially the de facto, not the de jure, but the de facto right to lighter sentencing in courts of law and things like that, right? He was calling out, one of the things that I found hilarious was in the 1970s, you had a bunch of feminists. Essentially, they came up with something called the wicked woman, prejudice or phenomenon, right? Where they said that women who killed their children, killed their husbands, committed violent crimes and stuff like that they declared that these women were subjected to harsher sentences than men on average, and it was because they were transgressing their gender role as women, and so they were being punished for it. But if you actually go back and look at all of the data, they were starting from the premise that these women were getting harsher punishment when they weren't. They were getting much more lenient punishment when they committed violent crimes, right, than men do. And so their entire position, their entire theory was based on a falsehood. And then, but you can go back 50 years and see E. Belfort Bax saying women who commit murder walk out of the courtroom free women.
Well, have any of you seen Chicago, the musical?
Standard operating procedure, right? Yeah, Chicago. He had it coming. He was popping his gum.
Yeah, I mean, it was coded into the cultural language through Chicago, the musical, which was made into a movie and has been, toured the country for years. So,
well, and what I find interesting is that the musical was so popular, and yet people somehow still think that women were treated harshly by the criminal justice system, and that men are not treated more harshly by the criminal justice system. When you have that song, he had it coming. He popped his gum. I said, if you pop your gum one more time, right? And then I fired 2 warning shots into his head.
I haven't seen
It's blatant. I know it's blatant. It's like clear, and then the whole movie celebrates that.
Yes. Yes. I mean, like the whole movie, that the whole story is a woman whose fiance broke up with her, right? And she
Because she
shot
was
him.
diddling on him.
Yeah, or he's cheating on her, yeah.
Well, that's why he broke up with her or whatever.
But it's like, so he broke up with her, right? And here's the thing too, right? You have incidents in 1910s, 1920s of something called the heart bomb racket, right? Do you know what the heart bomb racket was?
Wait, I want you to explain it, but I first just got to acknowledge the super chats that I got. So,
Okay.
Isan Doolin says, "Keep up the great work." Thank you very much. I very much appreciate that. And Duin Aether gave me $1.99 and doesn't say anything at all. So thank you very much. And also, please, if you haven't already, smash that like button. I would appreciate it. It would help me in the algorithm because I never really live stream. People don't go to my channel for live stream.
Okay, if you don't want to smash it, at least whack it with your dick.
Yeah. Or
and
lick
then
it.
send us a picture.
Lick it. I'm more of a fan of the licking, as I already said before.
Oh my goodness. I'm not going to say whether or not I'm a fan of that, but it's not like it's something that I have no experience with. So there you go.
So what were you saying before I wanted you to explain something?
Okay, the heart bomb racket. Okay, so the heart bomb racket was something that occurred that was going on. It was actually considered a racket, considered a common form of crime, right? In the 1910s and 20s in the United States. And what it was women, when they got engaged to be married and then got married, they were expected to step up financially in the world, right?
Mm.
Okay, so that's just hypergamy, and that's perfectly normal and all of that stuff, right? But you had this subset of women. You don't necessarily need to have a whole lot of them doing this to create a problem. But there was a small subset of grifters, female grifters, who would get into a courtship with a man. He would propose. They would announce the engagement publicly, right? And then the moment the engagement was announced publicly, the woman would completely change her personality and would start actually being really abusive and horrific and horrible, right? And then he would break off the engagement, and then she would sue him for breach of promise.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
And that was happening back in what era would you say?
This was 1910s, 1920s. And because at that time, a woman was expected to have a financial gain from marrying, right? Especially if she had become engaged with a rich man, right? He was expected, and he was ordered by the courts to pay her compensation for breaking off the engagement.
See,
oh my God.
What's strange is that I think it's for reasons like this that the communists and in particular probably the communist women prior to World War II ending, they didn't like the feminists because they were still the full-blown idealist communists in the United States and probably in the UK.
Yeah.
They didn't understand that communism was this actual like apocalyptic disaster. And so they were wanting to usher in the utopia where everybody was fair to each other, and they were seeing
and everyone was treated the same,
yeah.
right? And here were these sentimental feminists who were essentially exploiting biases that conferred privilege on women. There was another common scam that was going on in the 1910s and 20s in the US called the Badger game. And you can actually find a variant of it in an episode of Seinfeld where George Costanza meets a woman on the train, and she's like, and he's going to a job interview or something like that, and he's reading the New York Times or like the Wall Street Journal or something. He's reading the stock stuff, and she thinks that he's wealthy because he's dressed up for an interview, and he's reading the financial papers, right? So she thinks he's wealthy. And so she's like, oh, hey, you know, do you want to come back to my place? And he like ditches his job interview to go and get laid, right? And she handcuffs him to the bedposts, right? And then goes, says, I'm going to go change, you know, into something more comfortable. And then she comes out, she's dressed back up in her street clothes and looks through his wallet and takes his watch, right? Okay, well, what the Badger game was a variant of that was common in the 1910s and 20s, where a woman would essentially lure a man into a sexual liaison. They would go into their hotel room, and then her accomplice would burst in just as they were getting frisky, right, and catch them in flagrante delicto, and then say, I'm her husband, or I'm her father, or I'm her brother. And if you don't want everyone to know what you were about to do to my delicate virginal sister, right, then I'm going to have to ask you to pay me a whole bunch of money.
Yeah, you know what? That's what transgender prostitutes do. They get guys to come into hotel motel rooms, have a few friends, burst out the closet, threaten to, or maybe even do beat the guy up and say, you don't want the cops to know about this.
I don't know about that. All I know is that women were doing this in the 1910s and 20s. It actually had a name called the Badger game.
That's so funny.
And there was another scam that was going on where a woman, actually two other scams that were going on, where a woman would marry a man, then divorce him and get an alimony order. And then she would move to another jurisdiction and marry another man and divorce him and get an alimony order and then move to another jurisdiction. In some cases, these women didn't even have to get divorced. They would just legally separate and move out of state to another jurisdiction where records were not there, right? Marry another man. So the only women who were punished for this, right, for collecting alimony from 4 or 5 or 6 different men, right? The only women who were actually punished under the law for this were women who were found guilty of bigamy or polygamy, right? Who were found to be legally married to more than one man at one time, right? But that didn't necessarily absolve the men of their financial responsibility to her. And then there was another one. A woman would essentially go up to a man that she had had sex with within the last year with a baby and say, this is your baby, and so you're going to pay me. And if you don't want anybody to find out that you sired a baby out of wedlock, you're going to pay me. And she'd go up to like 6, 8, 10 different men, and she'd be collecting informal child support from all of them.
So, okay.
This still happens. I know a man who had sired a baby, like you said, and then she said, yeah, I won't tell anybody, just give me money. And I know someone personally, so it's still happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, but we're talking about a woman who's exploiting 10 different men, getting them to pay for her.
Well,
I'm saying, because she's saying these 10 different men are all the father of my child, and all of these men. And here's the thing, right? You know, if traditional masculinity included promiscuity, like the American Psychological Association says it does, then the traditional masculine norms and all of that, right? If it included promiscuity and getting laid and all of that stuff and all of those things, right? Men wouldn't be so interested in paying somebody money to keep it quiet that they had a child outside of a relationship or outside of wedlock, right? So it's literally women taking advantage of vulnerabilities in terms of masculine honor, right? Because this guy is like, well, I don't want to marry this woman, but if I sired a child, right, number one, I don't want people to know. Number two, I have a responsibility toward that child, right? So you essentially have women who were engaging in, back before even blood tests, right, who were engaging in exploiting multiple men to pay for one child that she convinced them all that they had sired, right? And none of this was legally enforced.
Mhm.
None of this had to go through a child support extraction agency, right? It was all just, you don't want your family to know, you don't want your colleagues to know, you don't want anybody to know that you sired an illegitimate child.
I'm in complete agreement. The person I know personally, she not only got paid for not telling anybody, but then her actual boyfriend she had, she just told him it was his because she was like carrying. And that was part of the agreement, that she would not tell anybody that it was my friend's baby. And then my friend would not tell her boyfriend that it wasn't his.
Fucking God. Oh my fucking, like, this is really frustrating. And you know, the age of 23andMe, right?
Yeah.
DIY DNA
Yeah.
tests, right? Like all of those companies that offer DIY DNA tests actually train their customer service personnel on how to deal with people who phone to essentially say, I just found out my dad isn't my dad, or I just found out my children aren't my children. What do I do?
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
So they
That
actually train all of their staff to deal with that.
Guess what? You don't have to go on Maury Povich.
You don't have to anymore. You just have to want to know what your ancestry is. And oh my goodness, my dad was Ukrainian, but all of my DNA comes from like I don't know, freaking France. Like, how is this possible? Like literally, that's really what it is. And you have this situation where there are lobby groups actually trying to make it illegal for men in particular to do those DNA DIY tests with themselves and their children. Right? It's already illegal in Germany. You can actually be prosecuted if you take a sample of your putative child's hair, right? And privately hire a DNA lab to do a paternity test outside of the mother's knowledge and permission, you can be arrested and prosecuted for that.
Yeah. Okay. So all of that stuff, it's so strange the way it went from feminists being completely horrible like that, you know, like basically all throughout modern history, coming up with weird manipulative games of pretending to be, you know, the victim or the unwed mother, blah, 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 blah.
It feels like there was actually a wave of initial feminists who maybe saw this and genuinely wanted more of a fair deal between the sexes. But then
yes, there were. I mean, like I'm plenty happy to give kudos to Sylvia Pankhurst, right? Mm-hmm. Not Emmeline Pankhurst, not Christabel Pankhurst, but Sylvia Pankhurst, right? Who left the suffragette movement because they participated in the White Ribbon campaign and they were campaigning for a mandatory draft in World War I.
White feather, yeah. So like essentially I'm like totally for feminists like that. I'm totally for feminists like Karen DeCrow, who actually freaking that. I don't know if you guys have all seen The Red Pill. Of course.
Okay, so
yeah, actually, Derek hosted a Q&A with Cassie J on my channel.
Oh, good. Yeah, but
we actually hosted 2 screenings at the Twin Cities Men's Center.
Oh, good. Well, Fred Hayward in that documentary talked about Frank Serpico.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. There was a movie starring El Pacino, you know, about his life as an undercover cop. You know, got shot, got his pension because he was disabled on the job. He was shot in the line of duty, right? And all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He went through all of this horrific shit, right? And then after the movie came out, a woman decided, oh, this is the Frank Serpico. I'm going to trick him into getting me pregnant. Mm-hmm. And okay, so he ended the story, Fred Hayward ended the story with, and she still got 90% of his pension,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
For having sex with him one time,
mm-hmm.
right? But Okay, but the reality is that Karen DeCrow, who was for a period of about 1 year in the 1970s, the national president of the National Organization for Women, she was the one who successfully argued in a court of law that Frank Serpico should not have to be responsible for that woman's child, that he should not have to be financially responsible, that child support is a violation of human rights because women have a unilateral right to decline consent to parenthood even after conception happens. And after conception happens, there is no such thing as accidental motherhood. There is no such thing as accidental birth, right? And if a child is born and a woman takes custody of it and becomes a mother to that child, that is 100% her unilateral decision, and men should not be required to finance women's unilateral decisions. She successfully argued that and got him out of that child support obligation, and then the appellate court decided that she was wrong.
Why?
Right. So there was a feminist who was the national leader of the biggest feminist organization in the world, who essentially successfully argued for legal paternal surrender, who successfully argued that if women have the right to refuse consent to motherhood, then men should have the right to refuse consent to fatherhood, and conception has nothing to do with any of it. Wow. And so I absolutely am able to concede that there are feminists out there, and there have been feminists out there who have been, we want Millicent fucking Fawcett, 100%, like absolutely, her statue should be the one standing in the place of Emmeline Pankhurst's statue in Trafalgar Square, right? Like what you see of the history is who everybody's heard of Gloria Steinem. Everybody has heard of Betty Friedan. Everybody has heard of Catherine McKinnon. Everybody has heard of Andrea Dworkin. How many people have heard of Karen DeCrow?
Yeah.
Who 2 years before her death joined the group Leading Women for Shared Parenting.
Yeah, what I would say, I think a good way, maybe hopefully to sum this, that idea of is that there's always been legitimate people who've legitimately wanted gender equality and fairness throughout these movements, but the fact of the matter is that they get overpowered by the women who are fighting the war. And every time the women who are fighting the war are around too many of these, nice people who do want equality, they drown them out. And because of the fact that only one group of these people are fighting an actual war, they will stop at nothing to make sure that they get their way. And that's what happened with the United States Communist Party. It used to not be feminist, and then there was a few different women. I mean, I would say a good few handfuls, but in my video, I list 3 major players that ended up getting really, really obsessed with female issues, all right before the World War II era, and then during World War II. And then this thing happened when so the communists in the United States, they actually supported the troops going to fight in World War II, and it was because they sided with Stalin. And then the soldiers came back, the husbands of these communist women who were male communists themselves often, because there was about 60,000 people in the United States Communist Party before the McCarthy era, which is kind of a lot if you think about it. They came back, and the women said, "We don't want to go back to the kitchen. We're the leaders of the Communist Party now." And since they had made all of this, progress in prioritizing female issues in the Communist Party, they sort of seemingly ended up kind of taking over, certainly by the time women's studies departments were founded, which were really just a Trojan horse of this weird female abomination of Marxism. And that's sort of how we ended with what it is today. It's like
what I want to bring up here is that Marxism is not.
Oh, and by the way, we have super chats. Yeah.
Okay, but just give me a moment.
Yeah.
Like, Marxism is not a completely useless freaking thing, right? It actually, you have to give it its due. right? Marxism or a conflict theory,
Okay.
right? Class conflict theory, right? That's a completely viable way of looking at society, but there are about 5, something like utilitarianism and other things like that, ways of looking at society, and then sociologically, and then when you get into sort of evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology, you have additional ways, additional lenses through which to view how women, how people interact with each other within society, how societies are formed. Are they formed from the top down, or are they formed from the bottom up, or is it an emergent property, right? Or is it a concerted campaign, right? All of these things, right? So you have all of these different ways of looking at society, and let's essentially just say looking at men and women in society and how they interact, and the different rights and obligations and entitlements and responsibilities that each had, right? Gender roles, right? Okay, so you have all these different ways of looking at it, but when you go into women's studies, what you find is that 90 to 95% of everything that they do, they look at through the conflict theory, the class conflict theory of Marx, but not the class conflict theory of Marx, but that bastardized version of it, where feminists came in and replaced men with bourgeoisie, women with proletariat, or proletariat with women, and they essentially said that men and women are classes of people in conflict, right? And that they are essentially two nations at war, or they have a master-slave relationship, which is completely biologically absurd, historically fucking retarded, right? And absolutely obscenely, but this is the only lens they use, right? If they even deign to consider a different lens, right?
But
it's in the service of discrediting that different lens and saying, well, but really that's just a bunch of bullshit, and we should look at it through this bastardized Marxist class conflict model.
Yeah, and there's an absolutely specific reason for that, which is that the women's movement of the 1960s, 1970s, and so the communist women who stayed being communists, or mostly being communists, which was probably most of them, after the atrocities of the Soviet Union in Red China were learned about in the late 50s, they didn't give up on being communists, but they were there.
It was a lot more difficult to actually say capitalism is the enemy.
Or they just went undercover or something like that. But what
they did was they said capitalism is not the enemy here. Capitalism is just a symptom of patriarchy.
Well, okay, yeah, no,
patriarchy is the ultimate enemy.
But okay, so this is something I was actually really, really studying. There's this great book called Red Feminism, which is written by a feminist academic who is trying her best to show that the contemporary, second wave onward feminist movement is based upon the work of communist women. So she's trying to draw the connection between how did the second wave end up so incredibly Marxist. And the thing that she says, which I found really interesting, is that the second wave feminists weren't entirely always Marxists, but they were marching in the streets and being taught by the female communists. And one of the things that I didn't explicitly say this in my video, but I found very interesting in the book, was that apparently a number of the young women who were, probably in their 20s or just college students or whatever, that got involved in the second wave of feminism were already talking about things that sounded very similar to Marxism, that they kind of came up with on their own. And then they met women who were basically retired communists, and the older women were shocked by how similar they sounded. So then they were like, sweet, well, I'll be the leader of your little group because I have organizing experience with the Communist Party, and we'll just take this crap about men, proletariat, blah, 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 and run with it. And so it was kind of this weird, slightly organic happening of young women who just sort of saw these things meeting with retired communists. And that the book I read was a historical academic thing with endless footnotes. So I think that is probably a little bit more of a dynamic version of what you're saying that I just happened upon because nobody's read this book. You have to like order it from the publisher. I have a few super chats. So they say Karen's tell truth bombs as usual from
Oh, you're still there, Prince? Looks like
yeah,
you cut out.
I can't hear you, Prince.
Okay, so it looks like it's just Prince. That super chat was from Rambam3000. So Karen's dropping truth bombs as usual. We also had 2 super chats from Devil's Advocate. They donated $10 and then later $5 more. They said, "Hey Karen, huge fan of your work. I'm going through family court. If you heard my story, you'd make a video about it immediately. I got people offering to buy me a lawyer. It's that egregious. I call the National Domestic Violence Hotline here. The point of contact for my state is called Sister Care. That should tell you a lot." So that's from Devil's Advocate.
Oh, well, yeah, no, I hear you, Devil's Advocate. It's I actually, when I was in Grand Prairie for a red pill screening, there were 2 people in the audience, a woman and a man, who were employed by the local domestic violence shelter, and they took great issue with the fact that we were like, yeah, there's no domestic violence services for men, and they're like, we help men, right? And I'm like, do you actually maybe like say that ever in public, right? Like you're defending yourselves now, but looking at your website, it only it describes, oh, we helped 4,000 women in the last 5 years, and it doesn't say anything about services for men. It doesn't say anything. Is so like they were like, well, we have flown men down from Grand Prairie, which is 3 hours drive north of Edmonton, to Calgary, to Strathmore, which is an hour south of Calgary. Calgary is 3 hours south of Edmonton. So a 7-hour drive, essentially. We've flown men to the 2 shelter beds in Strathmore that are the only shelter beds in the province that are available to men, right? And I'm like, do you advertise this? Right? I see nothing on your website that indicates that you even give men counseling or referral services or anything, right? So it's just it's infuriating. It's fucking infuriating. And then they were like, "How dare you accuse us of being sexist?" And it's like, all you do is talk about how many women and children you've helped and what your services are for women and children. You don't even freaking mention men other than referring them to batterer treatment programs. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like,
That was actually something that came up in Scotchy's little documentary on Netflix, which I'm sure you saw that.
Oh, such
I
a
know.
cool.
Yeah, I
Cool.
remember
Yeah.
the end of it when they talked to the domestic violence advocate, and like that was probably the most infuriating part of the whole thing. She's talking about how they help all these men, right? But like I'm sitting there like, how come now, right? Like she's like, well, we've recently found all these men suddenly who need help, and now we're doing this. And then they ask her,
and we
have
haven't
any
had
MRAs helped you? Yeah, none of the MRAs helped us, right?
No
It's like,
MRAs have. And here's the thing. Here's the thing about that. This is the most hilarious thing about that, right? I sat down for that interview in some kind of little fish and chip shop, little freaking hipster fish and chip shop in
it looked
Toronto.
like a nice restaurant. It looked like a nice restaurant.
Oh yeah, no, a hard ass fucking bench that made my butt bones hurt. But yeah, it was nice. It was nice enough. But okay, so I was in Montreal for a conference, right? And right around the time that Sachi Cool and her team were wanting to interview me, and they didn't want to come out to Edmonton. And I said, well, if you can fly me out to Toronto, right, I will go and interview with you in Toronto. And so I did a 90-minute interview with them in that restaurant. Okay. And we were in Toronto. And at the time, and she knew this because I brought it up in the interview, the Canadian Association for Equality was doing a fundraising drive to open the first men's domestic violence shelter in Canada. Okay. So the first dedicated domestic violence shelter for men in a major metropolitan center in Canada. There have been other shelters that accommodate men that will allow you to, you know, as a man, to access their services. 2 shelter beds in Strathmore. Wow. Right. Alberta, right, for the whole province, 2 shelter beds, right, for men, not designated for men, but available to men. And so we have some services, right, but no shelters other than the one Earl Silverman opened in Calgary out of his own pocket, and ran for 2 years, and then lost his house and then killed himself. Other than that, right, because he got no funding whatsoever from the province, right? So essentially, we're dealing with that. But she could have gotten into her van, right? And she was literally like, I can't afford to fly out to Edmonton to interview you because I have all this camera equipment and this crew, right, of 5 guys, all men, by the way, carrying all of the equipment and setting it up. And so it's too expensive to go out to. So if you can come to Toronto, we'll fly you out. We'll pay to fly you from Montreal to Toronto. And so I was like, okay, I'll do that, right? They could have gotten into an Uber and driven 20 minutes across town and interviewed Justin Trottier of the Canadian Association for Equality about the men's domestic violence shelter that he had just collected $200,000 or something like that of private donations to open, right? Mostly from MRAs. Right.
God, and the way he got
she could
treated
have done that.
was
She could have done that, but instead she flew herself and her crew of 5 guys and all her equipment down to fucking Houston or Dallas or wherever it was, Texas, to the one fucking shelter in the US where she had somebody who was going to actually support her narrative.
Oh, Prince, you're back.
yeah. Sorry. My mic just shorted out and I had to like unplug it, and I guess it's working. So we did get another super chat from Devil's Advocate. He says, in 2012 and before then, even in a married couple, the woman simply had to say she doesn't want you to have joint or anything, and the judge had to honor it. The law changed, but same judges, no change. I assume he's talking about his own situation and how the law changed in a way that it would help him, but the judges just didn't care.
Yeah, no, the judges. Well, but here's the thing, right? There's an issue here with the law and the policy, right? So the law may have previously biased itself against men, so biased mothers, right? The law itself may have previously said mother custody is generally best for children, right? And then the law might have been changed to be in the gender neutral best interest of the child, right? But the best interests of the child is surrounded by a whole bunch of policy and best practices and training materials that judges are trained under that say that, number one, mothers are generally safer with children. Children are better off with their mothers, particularly in their younger years, and that you don't have to, that there's no assumption that shared parenting should be a thing, because the policies surrounding the gender neutral law is that children are more harmed by not sleeping in the same bed every night than they are harmed by being deprived of one of their loving, involved parents, which is insane, right? A child is more harmed by not being able to sleep. So, I mean, like literally, like if we want to go into this, right? Say I have a sister, right? And she's a little bit of a flake, right? Okay. And so, because she's a little bit of a flake and she goes from job to job and she isn't really like, she doesn't have her shit together, but she has one child, and and they end up like they move maybe 5-6 times in a year between apartments. I should be able to go and apply in court for custody because I have a stable house that I own, that I've owned for 5 years, and I should be able to go to court and say that child is being more harmed by being dragged around from apartment to apartment with her mom than she would be by being ripped from her mother's arms and given into my custody because I can give her the same bed every night.
Yeah, it's kind of like a little arbitrary law.
Yeah.
So hey, I want to steer this conversation a little bit towards a topic that you could probably guess, more about the gay guys. And I know how to open this up because I know that my co-hosts have a lot to say about this. Derek, in particular, made a really, really wonderful video where he talked about this dynamics. But I don't know how much you've ever thought about this before. I haven't heard you talk about it on your streams and stuff, and I've certainly watched a lot of your streams and videos. But it's been said, and I don't know who said this. I think somebody left this in my comments, but supposedly some like lesbian from who is older said that the feminist movement never would have gotten nearly as far as it did if an entire generation didn't have to deal of gay men didn't have to deal with the AIDS crisis. And I find that very fascinating to think about because if you look at the essay Dangerous Trends in Feminism, which was written in around 76, 77, the gay guy who wrote it was so good at properly diagnosing the problem with the feminists. And he was like, yeah, I don't know why more gay guys aren't speaking out about it. I think it's because they actually do, appreciate women's issues, and also because they're scared of them. And so they don't want to fight against something that they want to support. And also because these people are bullies. But he was so clear about the way that he said that. And one of the things that I've found when I talk to red-pilled gay guys is that, like you looked at the Milo Yiannopoulos phenomenon. He wasn't particularly well read about feminist history or anything, I wouldn't say personally.
Oh, God, no.
But he was so great at being fearless and talking about how they act now and, beating them at their own game of being mean and, whatever.
Mean and outrageous and bitchy.
Yeah, and he got away with it for a long while. It's, I guess so that was what I thought was really, really great. And both of my co-hosts, we've talked about this, like in the same way that the honey badgers, and hey, for the record, just so you know, I definitely did start watching your guys's, streams and thinking to myself, I should do a gay version of that someday. So, hey, but gay, I feel like, women seeing this incredible injustice of the way that Western civilization has become towards men, women, it's the moral thing to do, to stand up and, put yourself on the line. I think that gay guys can do that and should do that more because not just because of the fact that it's harder to attack us, which is true, but because of the fact that we inherently prove that feminists are full of crap when they talk about patriarchy theory, and they try to lie about us and they say that we grope them, like I said before, but it doesn't really work. And so I really want to convince gay guys, and I don't mean gay individual guys, like I don't want to be the guy that a bunch of gay guys that never hang out with other gay guys occasionally watches. What I want to see the change happen would be for the gay male community at large, like the guys who go to brunch with 15 other gay guys every Sunday. I want them to get the memo that like feminism has literally nothing for you besides complexes and
blame, shame, and guilt.
Yeah, and it's like there's no reason a gay man should be a feminist at all whatsoever in any way. And like, how do you think that we can transition to overall helping culture accept that narrative? Because I feel like if the gay male community at large had that change at large, it would be so powerful.
Well, I honestly,
do you not know?
any suggestions from your co-hosts that would be helpful. Like I don't know how to. The only way I know to reach out to gay men and like help them find out what feminists really think about them is that Red Stocking Manifesto, and to tie it into the entire history of feminism, which is like the entire history of movement feminism, the really effective movement feminism, the feminism that is lauded now. So it's not so much Millicent Fawcett, it's more Emmeline Pankhurst, the suffragette bombers. It's not the suffragist women who wanted equal rights and responsibilities and equal accountability under the law, right? But the women who, it was the women who wanted all the rights of men, and none of the worries and responsibilities of a man, in the words of a Muslim woman who was interviewed on this subject. I don't want all of the worries and responsibilities of a man. I just want my equal rights, is what she said. So essentially, I think, when you look at that Red Stocking Manifesto, when you look at the decree, right, and you look at even trans activists these days, right, people like Riley Dennis, if you don't want to sleep with a trans woman, you're bigoted, right, and all of this stuff, right, you as a man are not allowed to have a preference, for what kind of body parts you want involved with your body parts.
Yeah, it's like, how dare you not want to have sex with us? And by the way, how dare you keep groping us all the time? Like, the mixed messages.
And fat phobia, the whole fat acceptance movement and all of that stuff. And which gay guys, it doesn't include men. It doesn't. They're not arguing that men are beautiful at any size, right? They're arguing that women are beautiful and deserve love at any size. If you go in and if you were to do a content analysis of romance novels, right, I guarantee you, right, there will be about 10 to 20% of heroines in these novels who are plain, right, like Jane Eyre, right, or fat, like there's an actual genre of, right, of dirty books for women called BBW, Big Beautiful Women, right? Okay, and you will have these, and these are genres of fiction written for women, right, by women. You have an entire genre of BBW, Big Beautiful Woman, right, who still is entitled to have a Matthew McConaughey.
Or I think it would be Matthew McConaughey, Fabio. Who would be the guy of the moment?
Oh God!
The guy who plays
Ryan Gosling.
The guy who plays Thor.
Oh fuck yeah! Oh, like 100%. Yeah.
Chris Hemsworth, right?
Yeah. And you would and just because she's overweight doesn't mean she doesn't deserve a man of that caliber, right?
Yeah,
and not only is he ripped and gorgeous, right, but he's got a good career and he's high status and he has a lot of money. Maybe he inherited some money from his rich parents and then turned it into some kind of startup company where he's the new Elon Musk, only better looking, right? Like that's literally what women are eating up. They're eating it for fucking breakfast. And I can have that guy even if I'm a chubby fucking 5.
Okay, yeah, and that's funny that women think that way, but like what? Okay, and I want you to say whatever, Jordy, Lordy.
Okay, but I just want to say,
okay,
but if some guys collect in some forum somewhere on the internet to complain about how they're unattractive and they can't get laid, right? They're misogynists.
Well, and they're a potential serial killer.
Oh yeah, well, and some of them are.
Well, yeah. Wait. But I want to bring it back. I can bring this back to the gays, though.
Well, that's my comment. Actually, is like around what you're saying. Is it's no wonder to me when I hear Karen, you talking about this, that from the perspective of a man, because like in the gay community, like I remember going to living in Chelsea in New York City, going to the gay gift shops around there and looking at these kinds of fictional books written for gay men, written for all shapes and sizes of gay men, because in the gay community there is body acceptance and body celebration, and there's like, all of that, and seeing that, like, wow, like as a man being exposed to content that was celebrating men in a gay gift shop, was actually really enheartening for me. And it's no wonder to me, like, the shift, because I have now like seen how sad almost young single straight men are out in the bars and clubs when you have all these gay men around who are actually so ready to love them, so ready to be like, why is no one fucking these guys? Like,
yeah. Well, no, okay. Wait, I want to say something though about the gay community and the body positive thing and everything, because we have this, feminist media just crams it all down your throat. Like you cannot walk 3 feet without bumping into some sort of feminist propaganda, metaphorically on the internet. Like it's like they're just, someone's going to call you out if you say that you're attracted to someone who's too skinny or blah. It's just like all obsessed over. Whereas in the gay community, they actually practice what they preach. Like you can go to, like, you will know what is the bar that's for bears and leather. And every night, if you live in a urban mecca that has lots of gay bars, you will know which bar you can go to where you will find overweight guys, and they date each other. They are fine with that. And you can even find parties that are about, overweight guys taking off their shirts or being in long johns or something. And that is actually just a part of the gay community, and it's been a part of the gay community as long as I've been an open homosexual. They don't try, like, there's not a whole lot of propaganda about it. It's more just like, yeah, we're bears. That's what we are. We like bears. We are bears.
Well, but the thing is that bears fuck each other, right?
Yeah.
Like bears don't expect to fuck. What's his name?
Well, there's otters too,
right?
Yeah, otters who love bears.
Yeah, but they okay, but
you're one lucky bear if you get him.
Like you don't feel it's your entitlement.
Yeah,
right? To be able to nail the fucking best looking gay guy on the planet, right?
Right.
Right. You have realistic expectations, and OkCupid had some stuff research that they published that they then deleted from their blog because it didn't make women look very good, where they essentially said the men on the site, when they're asked to rate women in terms of their attractiveness from their profile photos, right, it was like a beautiful, perfectly symmetrical bell curve. It was like, yeah, it was exactly what you would expect to see, right? Most people were clustered among the average, right? And then there were the tails. There were some that were really unattractive, and then there were a few that were really attractive. And, it was like, essentially it was a perfect bell curve, right? But women on the site rated men on the site, 80% of them below average in attractiveness, right? And it's like, it's because you literally think, and I think this is because women are so completely unacquainted with men and how men work, right? They think that because I can convince a guy to fuck me,
mm-hmm.
I'll be able to convince him to commit to me, right? And so whereas a man who's an 8 might fuck a 5, a woman who's a 5 on a Saturday night when he has nothing better to do, right? Okay, he'll do that because, hey, right? What's it costing him? Nothing, right? He's not gonna fucking want to marry her. and I'm just like, what the fuck is it with you women that you can't understand this, right? And you think that somehow you as a 5, right, who can like work your way up to a 6.5 with tinted moisturizer, facial contouring, right, and bronzer, right? And all of this other shit and some gel inserts in your bra, right? You know, and a bra that has like some serious fucking engineering that's gone into it. Like they had an architect design that, right? All of this shit. And you can, and somehow, when he wakes up to the real you the next morning, he's still going to think that he made a good deal and that he's like in it for the long haul. No.
I've had straight guys that I know have talked about why it's really, really good to have a bisexual female friend when you go out, because that girl will be able to be like, oh, no, she's not going to be hot naked in the morning. I assure
you
you.
can just disenchant all that shit.
And she'll tell you exactly why. She'll be like, okay, so see her makeup, see her bra. Okay, yeah, no, she's not actually that hot.
Look at all of these illusions that she's putting. Like, these are all card tricks. These are cheap fucking.
This is how good the trick works.
Yeah,
this is how good the trick works. My friend is a male who dresses up in the illusion with the contouring and the eyeshadow and the long hair and has the body, looks like a supermodel body, and goes out to straight clubs and picks up on guys all night long and leads them on until he's finally like, oh yeah, I'm a man, by the way. You didn't know that?
Really?
Yeah.
I was in I was in a band with you remember, you've seen pictures, or you've met my old bandmate a number of times. I'm not going to say who they are, but the black drag queen who is particularly pretty. When we had a photo shoot for the cover of our CD, she was dressed up in like full on like pads and stuff, like to make her hips look big. She's actually just a skinny dude, but you know, there was full on like high, probably very expensive padding to make it look, you know, real. And there was literally like dudes walking by being like, how you doing? What's up? We're like just shooting a photo shoot for
well, and you know, like, how is this different? I would say, how is this different from that scene in True Lies, right, where Bill Paxton convinces Jamie Lee Curtis that he's an international spy who needs her to hold his briefcase for, you know, a few days while he lets the heat wear off, and, you know, and all of this stuff, right? Okay, like literally you have male feminists saying, if a man pretends, right, to be something that he isn't, so if, and these are all cases that have gone to court, right? Like cases that have gone to court, like an Arab Muslim convinced an Arab Jewish woman, right, to have sex with him by saying that he was Jewish. And he was convicted of rape. Right? And it's like, and you know, Bill Paxton in that movie almost convinced Jamie Lee Curtis to sleep with him because he had her convinced he was an international spy, right? And all of this, like, okay, but when you look at the way women trick men into thinking, like, you are going to wake up to this in the morning, right? You are going to wake up to the exact same thing that you went to bed with last night, right, in the morning, and you're gonna feel fine with it because, hey, I didn't engage in any deceptive tactics at all, right? And when you look at the issue for incels, right, incel men, right, it's a lot more difficult, right? Yeah. People notice if you're a man and you are wearing makeup, people notice that you're a man wearing makeup. Right? I had a friend in high school.
Unless you're in a nightclub with
I had a friend in high school. He was like a perfectly straight guy, right? Named Brad. And when he got a zit on his face, he would use concealer. And he took no end of shit for it because people realized that he was using concealer. Right? People could see it. And because you can see it. If you have an actual blemish and you use concealer, people can tell. Right? And men are not allowed to do that. Apparently.
We actually have a whole term in the gay community. We call it gay face. But it's not confined to makeup. It's also like the overwhelmingly perfect grooming and just some other miscellaneous thing that you look at a guy and you're like, oh God, he has such a gay face. And you just kind of call it gay face. By the way, Mile Kinslow gave us, technically me, $20. Says, so glad you back, Prince. Big fan, Karen. You are the 21st century Camille Paglia. And Spacepan, who's busily typing away in the chat, said, isn't Camille Paglia the 21st century Camille Paglia?
She is. She is the 21st century Camille Paglia. I am the 21st and a half century Camille Paglia.
So, okay, another thing I wanted to bring up. I remember you guys talking about, so this is kind of one of the reasons that I wanted you to meet both of my co-hosts, but just to be perfectly honest, I love Derek. I love his videos. I think he's great. I think he's a really, really great mind, but there's something about Lordy here. You always said, and this is a big statement. This is a very big statement, and I will admit that. You guys would say as MRAs that you're looking for your Jesus. Like you're looking for this person that would simultaneously be really good at speaking about men's issues, but also be like, I don't know, nice and able to talk to the general populace. And I was thinking in my head when you guys were saying that, oh, it should probably be a gay guy because, you know, he's removed from so much of the dynamics between men and women that, you know, like what if it was a nice version of Milo Yiannopoulos who maybe knew a little bit more about stuff and wasn't just, you know, provocateur. And then I was like, oh, maybe it could be me. And then I was like, no, I'm a little bit too mean as well. And then Lordy here came out of the closet as an MRA who has an entire year's worth of therapy school that he realized was actually,
among other things,
was not actually going to be beneficial for his healing work that he would want to do. And he became an MRA, and he's pretty new to everything, but he is a really, really nice guy. And so that's why I wanted him to meet the Honey Badgers at some point, because I feel like he could actually, you know, walk through the hostility, because I've seen him do it on his Facebook timeline. I've seen him come up with like the perfect answers to these like extremely hostile feminists. So I wanted to mention that. What do you think about the concept? Now, you obviously you don't know Lordy, but what do you think about the concept of the potential MRA Jesus being a gay man?
I have no problem with an MRA Jesus being a gay man. Like I essentially think that I don't know whether I would like there to be an MRA Jesus. You know, like I think honestly, what we need are a multitude of viewpoints.
Okay, well, we got that.
You know, and like, so I don't know whether like putting every egg in one basket, whether gay or straight, is the way to go. I think, essentially, I try to shy away from messiahs. Like I am a big fan of Jordan Peterson. Okay. And Jordan Peterson is the closest thing to a anti-social justice messiah that exists on the planet right now. Right?
What about Candace Owens? I'm so kidding.
Oh, Candace Owens is...
she has her moments. I'm kidding. Keep going with the Jordan Peterson thought.
Okay, so Jordan Peterson is I think, unabashedly pro-man. Oh my, shut up, dog. I don't think he understands everything about the condition of men, right? And I don't think he understands everything about feminism, right? But I think that his heart is in the right place and that he's open to learning. I know this because he and I were friends before he even became big. And then when he said the things that he did about MGTOW and I put up my response to him, he responded by saying that was something that he had regretted saying. Right?
I remember that. Yeah, he went out against MGTOW, and what was it? Was it you specifically who had a hand in getting him to?
Oh no, I'm sure it was me.
Back.
I'm sure it was me.
I'm pretty sure
because he reached out to me. I'd been following his work. You know, he'd been sort of peripheral in the in the public debate, showing up on the agenda with Steve Paikin occasionally and stuff like that, right? So I'd been following his work and stuff for a while. And then he reached out to me and said, and this is the hilarious thing, right? Because this is the weirdest conversation I've ever had with an academic in my life. He sends me this email from a Gmail address, right? So it's not his University of Toronto email. But it's from a Gmail address, and the subject line says, "It would be interesting to talk to you sometime." And then the body of the email was completely empty. And I was like, am I being trolled by an imposter?
Am I supposed to get really paranoid at the moment?
Yeah, who the fuck is this? Right?
That's how you know it's a legit boomer email.
Yeah. Well, okay. And then so I answered, sure, when would you like? And then like 2 months later, he answers, how's such and such a time at such and such a date? What's your Skype address? And so I'm like, okay, that sounds good. Here's my Skype address, right? And it's like that's all there was. There wasn't any preamble, not even a greeting, not even a hello, Karen. I appreciate your work. Nothing. Not a sincerely Jordan B. Peterson. Nothing. Right? Just like these like they were like texts, right, on your phone, right, through email. And I'm like, oh my God. So then like my Skype goes off and I answer it and I see him there and I'm like, holy shit, it's actually you. I thought I was being trolled, right? And this is 6 months before he actually came out and became like the big thing because he took that stand against Bill C-16, right? And so like, I am a big, huge fan of Jordan Peterson. I think he has so much to offer everybody, right? I think he has so much that's positive to say about masculinity. But he's not the Jesus.
Yeah, okay. I just want to say what's really funny is my mother is really into him. She's read both of his books now, and she goes through YouTube and finds videos. Like she's now into the territory of watching criticism videos, like that one that came out a few days ago that got like 125,000 views, called like, God, what is it? I would have to actually look at my email too. But yeah, okay, I'm not even gonna look for it. My mom is like very much up to date on all things Jordan Peterson. But yeah, so you were saying,
but, as much as I think that he's a persuasive personality, he's extremely careful in his speech, right? And yet daring at the same time, right? He dared to ask, what about banning makeup for women in the workplace? He dared to ask that question, right? Okay, that's like, people don't ask those kinds of questions, right?
Yeah.
And all of these things, I still don't think that all of our eggs should go in the basket of a single messiah. I think,
I actually agree.
Yeah.
That was something that I remember you guys talking about, and maybe you're just sort of throwing that out there years ago, and have decided against it. The point, though, that the main point is that I really do, I
think gay men have a lot to contribute to anti-feminism.
Yeah.
100%.
It's like Peter Lloyd. Peter Lloyd's a great example of it.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah. And what I'm saying is both my two co-hosts, absolutely great. Like my channel is, people have seen it by now. They know that I exist. So I can't say much about myself. But both of them, I want, Derek to make a lot more videos, and he is great. But Lordy in particular, and this is why, both of them should come on Honey Badger sometime, hang out for Fireside or whatever. But Lordy in particular, if there was ever something like a men's conference where you could convince one of the nice feminists who really is starting to realize that the men's movement is not going away, and really, really believes in all of her heart that feminism cares about men too, and wants to have a polite discussion with somebody that's, just going to be completely nice and blah, 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 blah. I think that Lordy here could be that guy, is what I'm saying.
I appreciate
way more than me. Way more than me, because I would not be that nice, probably.
Well, that's entirely possible.
Right.
Um,
I do appreciate that. I do want to make a statement that I'm not a total prick in actually thinking that I'm something other than who I actually am. Being a Messiah or some type of Jesus character, nor would I agree with the idea of that
Yeah.
at all myself.
No, I mostly
But
just meant that and that's such a silly way of phrasing it, because like I don't agree with that concept of like having it be that way. It's mostly just like I do think that there should be more conversations with like you had the debate, Karen, with that woman at MythCon or whatever, and it was pretty good because she was like fairly reasonable as far as feminists go.
Oh, the reason why she was reasonable is because we had a preliminary chat with the organizers, like a hangout, and I talked about a lot of the things that I talk about, and then she looked into them, and so she essentially educated herself and got prepared. If we had not had that chat, if she had not had that advance notice of who she was going to sit down on a panel discussion with, it would have been a completely different thing.
Well, see, that's awesome, and I'm thinking that there's going to be more of that stuff in the future. But I think that it would be valuable for it to be more often men. Like you've done so much by opening people's eyes to the idea that these are just real issues. It's not about me whining because my ex-wife, which is what people think of as MRAs. It's like these are very tangible issues. I think that easing people into the conversation with gay men would be a thing, and Lordy is a lot nicer than I am, and that's the whole point of it.
I agree.
Do you see what I'm saying?
I agree that like that people who are not men, or people who are not the majority of men, right? Absolutely, if they're taking a position in favor of men's rights, or in opposition to feminist dogma, right, they're invaluable. They're absolutely invaluable. How many times have people like myself or Allison said that gay and bisexual men and trans people are actually overrepresented in the men's rights movement compared to the general population? Right? Lots of times. Right? And that essentially means it's not a movement for straight white men. It's a movement for people who are male, people who have been male, people who want to be men, right? Anybody who has to deal with any kind of cultural aspect of masculinity, cultural or legal aspect of that, absolutely 100%. That's it has to do with them, and there's a ton that MRAs, right? Whether we're women or straight men or black men or whatever, we have a lot to learn from gay men, from trans women, about how gender operates in society, right? Just because gay men have different experiences from straight men, particularly in terms of sexuality and how their sexuality is perceived, right? Trans women have something to say about female privilege, just like that lesbian Nora Vincent had to say when she spent 150 days essentially living as a man, and had to check herself into a fucking mental institution at the end of it. Because she was just like, the way I as a lesbian was treated by women when I was hitting on them was more gentle and more kind than when I was presenting as a man and hitting on women. And these are straight women. Right? And they were more gentle in their rejection of a lesbian, somebody that they had absolutely 100% from the get-go interest in having anything to do with sexually, right? They were more gentle in their rejection of me than when I was approaching them as a man, and an attractive, reasonably attractive man. She made a fairly decent looking man. But yeah, she came out and said, I think being female is a privilege. Even being a lesbian woman is a privilege.
I actually have a really great live stream with it was done in the summer of 2017 with, it's on this channel, with a trans guy who was a feminist who before he transitioned into being male. So he was a female lesbian identified person and then decided that he was going to be trans, and he had a little bit of a mission statement, I guess is the best way to say it. In his transition, he thought that he was going to educate the world about male privilege, and he took that on. And then,
yeah.
And then got red pilled real quick.
Didn't exactly fucking work out. Yeah.
Yeah. And so yeah, I talked to him for a good 2 hours or so. And
no, it's like it's amazing. It's amazing when you look at like people like Blair White and Theron Meyer, who were like, when we started to go out presenting as female, right? People were interested in being helpful. People were kinder. People, just like strangers on the street, were kinder to us, were more polite, more deferent, right? All of those things than when we went out as, when we were presenting as male. And it's like, well, duh, that's what we've been saying, right? All this time, right? There is such a thing as female privilege. There may be such a thing as male privilege, right? But it doesn't apply in every single fucking aspect of every single context, right? Like, okay, it's a male privilege to be taken more seriously in the boardroom. It's not a male privilege when you're in a confrontation with a cop and they're taking you more seriously than they would a woman because they're more likely to shoot you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need to actually fucking look at this in the broader, overarching, nuanced context of how things play out in the real world, right? When I go to a freaking, when I'm trying to sell life insurance, right, or homeowners insurance, and I'm a man, people are going to take me more seriously. They're going to think I'm an authority, all of this stuff, right? But also, when it comes time to be convicted and sentenced for a fucking crime, right, for financial fraud or whatever, they're going to say, well, you were the one who did that. You were the authoritative figure. You were the one who freaking was responsible for that, right? So, like, it's like they're gonna let the woman go, right?
Yeah.
Just like, in the boardroom when the woman says, well, I have this idea, and nobody takes her seriously. Well, when a woman is like, I have this idea, I'm going to molest an underage boy, right? Yeah. And then nobody in the fucking courtroom takes that seriously.
Yeah. I'm crying because I shot my boyfriend.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's like really, this is where we're at. And we're supposed to interpret this state of affairs into some kind of situation where it's like completely black and white, and men are privileged in every freaking single situation, and women are disadvantaged or oppressed or have it worse in every fucking single situation, every circumstance.
That's what fucking really grates my nerve about the intersectionals a lot of the time, is that they know perfectly well that there is supposed to be context applied to intersectionality.
Oh yeah, no.
But what they do is they say, well, the context is we live in a patriarchal civilization, so
yeah, and male privilege,
even if you can list off of, like, I don't know, 35 disadvantages that men have in society offhand, none of those count because the overall context is patriarchy.
Yeah, no, what frustrates me the most is when they came up with this freaking term Gaytriarchy. You remember that? Right? Yeah. Okay, and I have described it thusly, right? Okay, so I initially had a bowl of lettuce, right? And I called it patriarchy. Then I added a bunch of mandarin orange slices, croutons, and some chopped chicken, right? And I called it Gaytriarchy, right? And declared that it was no longer salad. Right? This is no longer salad because I added some stuff. I added some window dressing. I added some garnish, right? Therefore, it's no longer salad, right? The gist of it is, right, that intersectionality does nothing for men. Yeah, okay. So black men can be oppressed because they're black. Gay men can be oppressed because they're gay.
But only kind of. But only kind of.
But
not so much anymore.
No. But they can still be oppressed because they're gay, right? Disabled men can be oppressed because they're disabled, but no man, just like before, can be oppressed because he's male, because he's a man, right? Like this is they've literally just added all of his other shit, right? The mandarin orange slices, the croutons, and the chopped chicken, right? And they've declared that it's no longer salad. No, it's still fucking salad because the salad is the lettuce. And the lettuce is patriarchy. And you will not reform your position on patriarchy. You will not reform your position on male privilege and female oppression. You will not ever come out and say that women have significant power to dictate social norms, right? Or if you will say women have power to do it, you will say they only have that power because men allow them to have that power.
So
if you dive down through all of the layers of the onion, what do you get? More onion.
So Derek here had a really great way of putting so yeah, it's all completely insane. And gay men, I think in particular, should theoretically be the first people to raise their hand and be like, okay, so none of that makes sense because
raise their hand and say talk to the hand.
Yeah, I kind of remember something very different growing up and like starting to act kind of queer in middle school. You know, like for me, I went to a middle school that was 80% black, and I sound about the same now as I did then in terms of my gay accent. So it was kind of wasn't. I didn't really feel like I had male privilege, just to be honest. And
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, and Derek has a great. He has this great video called Feminists Can End the Men's Movement Anytime They Want to, which I hosted on my channel when I was taking a break. And one of the great things that he says is he's like, he says something about this is where the gays come in and fuck everything up because women or society at large have underestimated gay men's capacity to be every bit as bitchy and entitled as women are. Would you want to expand upon that, Derek, a little bit?
I mean, that kind of sums it up, right? But part of it, I think that men, they're very reserved because in order for them to have any sort of sexual like appeal or any kind of sex appeal among women, they really do have to provide for and concede a lot to women. Like these ongoing jokes in all of comedy, right? Is that even though women are wrong, you just kind of let them think they're right? Let them have their victories, right? So that men can have their space. But with with gay men, you don't have that dynamic, right? So that entire dynamic just gets, the legs swept out from underneath it. And then, women don't have that power they bring to the table of being able to basically use their privileged stance in the sexual relation.
Like, with the Chris Rock joke where he's all like, men, you cannot argue with your woman. You can't, because you cannot win. Because you see, men are disadvantaged when it comes to arguing. Because men have a need to make sense. Women ain't gonna let a little thing like sense get in the way of their argument.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that exact same thing.
No, and it's like the Bill Burr thing where he's like, when you're arguing with your woman, right? Like here's how men argue, right? They argue the point, they stay in the pocket of the argument, right? Women, they go rogue, right? And then they start to concoct this incredible Hail Mary statement like, you're gonna die alone just like your father, right? Something that they know is gonna make you just like freaking lose your mind and then you're just going to call them a cunt, and now we're in this room now.
And yeah,
right?
and then they're the victim, and how very dare you?
Yeah. Well,
and then they
you need to call me a cunt.
Yeah, and then they start gaslighting and be like, "You were so mean, and you were yelling at me." And
look at Sachi Cool. What did she choose out of that 90-minute interview? A 90 fucking minute interview. What did she choose to highlight? She's like, "You called me a cunt," and I was like,
"Oh, that girl."
I was like, "Did I?"
That's the one where you told her that you still think she's a cunt.
Here's how the interview went. Here's how the interview went.
She did.
They selectively edited it.
It was so good though. It was
so good.
Yeah, no,
I'm so glad they kept that in there because
they didn't hurt me. They didn't hurt me by doing it, right? But here's how the interview went, right? It was about 10 minutes in, and she said, "I'm really surprised at how polite you're being, how civil you are." And I'm like, "Well, I try to be civil to people." And she's like, "Oh, I didn't get that impression." And I'm like, "How so?" And she said, "Well, you called me a cunt." And I'm like, "Did I?" And she says, "Are you denying it?" And I'm like, "No, I probably did, but I just don't remember." Right. And then she said, "Yeah, you called me a cunt multiple times, like 6 times." Right. And I'm like, "Okay, like, what's your point?" And then she said, "Well, have you changed your mind?" Right. And I'm like, "Yeah, not really." And then they clipped in that laughter. I didn't actually laugh after saying that.
Oh,
they clipped it in. I'm kind of glad they did.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it was like, I haven't really changed my mind. Right. And then they showed her face. They showed her face like I had just forced her to eat dog poo. Right. Like she just cannot understand how somebody would take a dim view of her behavior, right? And it's like she's just like, I can't believe, like she didn't walk back her cunt comments, right? And I'm just like, why would I? Like, what have you done in the 10 minutes we've been conversing to make me walk that back? Right? Nothing. Right?
You the way that feminists act about the word cunt, you'd believe that it's like that it literally feels like a fucking titty twister or something when they, it's like, "Oh my god, you called me a cunt." Like you seriously reached through my shirt and tried to rip my nipple off, is what they act like.
Yeah, I know, but essentially, like, I call everybody cunts, male or female.
Yeah, me too.
And
they say it in Spain all the time.
And, when I was writing erotica, I used the word cunt a lot because I was writing fantasy erotica that was set in a quasi-medieval era, right? And pussy was anachronistic, and I also don't like the word pussy. Cunt is very workaday. It's a very straightforward term. It's not cutesy. It's not it's not euphemistic. It says what it says. It does what it does. And if it was good enough for Chaucer, it's good enough for me.
I got banned from Facebook for calling a cunt a bitch, and I'm sitting there like, should have called him a cunt. Like, I
got a Twitter 24-hour timeout for calling a TERF a gash.
Oh my god, a gash. Okay, that's over the top.
Yeah, because it was a fucking TERF that wouldn't leave me alone. The TERFs are very persistent when they have a problem with you.
Well, she does have a gash, so.
I also want to know the one that Sachi thing. She's so offended over the word cunt, right? But like, how does she open that? "Oh, you're a lot nicer in person. I didn't think," right? Like, isn't that so much worse than just a word? Like,
no, and it's like, and I'm looking at it like, okay, so literally Eve Ensler opened her keynote address at the 2012 National Organization for Women Conference, right? With "Are the vaginas in the house?" And everybody cheered. And then she said, "Any vagina-friendly men in the house?" And everybody cheered. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so we're referring to women as body parts and we're referring to men as persons. That's great. That's a great start. And then later on, she says, "Deep down in my heart, in my soul, in my vagina, I know the women's spring is coming." Right? When she was talking about her V-Day thing, right? Where women just leave their jobs, walk off the job and dance, right, on Valentine's Day. Anyway, so she's like, deep in my heart, in my soul, in my vagina, I know. And I was sitting there thinking, you know, things in your vagina. That's the first thing that I have a problem with. The second thing I have a problem with is brain didn't even make the list.
Wait, what?
Brain didn't
Brain.
even make the
Oh,
list.
yeah,
Deep in
yeah.
my heart, in my soul, in my vagina, I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Not in your brain.
Meanwhile, if a guy thinks with his dick, well, God forbid.
Yeah. How
Well,
absolutely dare he?
Although the
Anyway,
irony is all three of those things work with the biblical sense of no.
oh yeah, well, okay.
Maybe we're just not being
Let's not get into
charitable.
that. Let's not get into that. I just want to say it has now been 2 hours, and
Yes, it absolutely has been. And I got one more super chat, Ram
Okay.
Bam, and he says, "Here's a contribution so Karen can buy some throat lozenges to heal from all of the shouting," which is true. She's actually literally is sick. So actually, that is. Thank you very much. I suppose I should forward that over to you.
no, you don't need to forward it over to me. I'm fine. I have multiple packets of Halls. I have some DM cough syrup, and I am currently doped up on Benadryl, so I'm probably going to have a nap the moment that we get off.
Okay. Well, I will send you the one video that I was talking about before, which I don't remember, and I also am going to make a video about why exactly more gay men aren't MRAs soon. Because of this conversation, it inspired me. It was amazing to talk to you and have you on my channel. Thank you very, very much. Does anybody have any last words or anything?
Last requests?
Well, I mean, if you want to go to sleep, I think requests would probably be a little bit much. But does anyone have any closing sentiments?
Borat, be quiet.
It's
Small testicle dog. Stop.
It's been great, Karen. I learn a lot from you every time I get to hear you talk. So it's been a pleasure.
Oh yeah, no, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. Oh my God, dogs! What? Sorry, the one with testicles is at the window barking, and the one in the crate is responding to the at the window.
No, yeah, the
barking.
dogs barking have become like a classic Karen flavor.
Oh God. It's like literally they are. I love them. All right.
Well,
Okay.
Karen, I also want to thank you. You know, your old videos in the kitchen are, I think, the gold standard of YouTube, and I think that it's been an inspiration to a lot of people. And just hope you keep on keeping on. And it was really fun talking to you today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I actually there's. I do occasionally go back and look at them out of nostalgia purposes, and I am doing things. I am absolutely doing things. I am keeping on, just not so much on YouTube. I get lots of AM radio interviews in the US talking about a multitude of subjects. It doesn't pay. You know, it doesn't get me ad revenue or super chats, and it doesn't always, you know, hit the, you know, a national audience or an international audience. But I feel like I'm, I think it's worthwhile to have just, you know, morning drive time radio, me giving my opinion on various subjects that are, you know, the Kavanaugh hearings, all kinds of things like that. That I think it actually getting the virgin bums on virgin seats is worthwhile, and so it's worth my time, even though it actually costs me in terms of money. So, so yes, I am still keeping on, even if you don't see me so much on my own channel.
Well, it's always wonderful to hear from you. And audience, by the way, next week on Saturday we are going to have Chadwick Moore, who's been on my channel a few times by now, and he has not confirmed a time yet, but he said he would be around next Saturday. So that'll be the next version of Gaytriarchy. And thank you very much for tuning in. And I'm going to end the broadcast in 3, 2, 1.
Good night.